The moment I saw Olivia on the upper deck, my world tilted. She stood beneath the golden sun, the sea breeze dancing through her hair, laughing at him. Michael stood close, far too close, as if my existence had already been erased. His hand rested lightly on the small of her back, a place only I had the right to touch. They looked like a perfect couple, carefree and intimate, completely unaware that I was watching. This wasn't just any vacation. I had booked this cruise to save our marriage, 5 years together, and we were unraveling. The distance between us had grown, but I never imagined she would fill that gap with another man. And now, on the very trip meant to bring us back together, she had the audacity to bring her lover along. I clenched the cold railing, my knuckles whitening under the pressure. Every passenger strolling by became a silent witness to my humiliation. The crew exchanged glances, some whispering, others politely. Averting their eyes, they all saw it. The betrayal was no longer a private wound, it was a public spectacle. Michael whispered something in her ear and she laughed again, her head tilting slightly toward him. That laugh used to belong to me. That softness in her eyes used to be, for me. Now it was his, and they were parading it openly on my ship as if daring me to react. I inhaled deeply, forcing the rage to settle beneath my skin. Confrontation now would give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. No, I would not give them that power. Not here. Not yet. Instead, I turned away, my mind racing. The cruise was under my financial control. I had invested heavily into this line, silently securing authority few knew I possessed. And now, for the first time, I would wield it. If Olivia wanted to turn our anniversary into a mockery, I would give her something to remember, a lesson neither she nor Michael would forget. This cruise would not end the way she planned. Not for her, not for him, and certainly not for me. Olivia had always been the center of any room she entered. When we first met, it was her confidence that drew me in, her unapologetic charm paired with a sharp wit that kept everyone around her captivated. She was beautiful, yes, but it wasn't just her beauty. It was the way she commanded attention, as if every conversation gravitated towards her naturally. I was no exception. Back then, I was nobody. A struggling entrepreneur scraping my way into the cruise business while competing against corporate giants. I didn't come from wealth or privilege. Everything I had, I built from the ground up. But Olivia saw something in me. Or maybe she saw a challenge, someone she could shape, someone she could build beside her. When we started dating, it felt unreal. She carried herself like a queen, and somehow I was the man standing beside her. She encouraged my ambitions, introduced me to people who could help my business grow, and offered advice that often cut to the heart of my problems. Olivia was sharp, decisive, and unflinchingly practical, and for a while I believed we were perfect for each other. After 2 years of dating, we got married. The wedding was grand but private, exactly as she wanted. Her circle of friends, powerful, wealthy, and intimidating, welcomed me with polite smiles that never quite reached their eyes. Olivia fit into their world effortlessly. I was the outsider clinging to her hand, trying to keep up. Despite the imbalance in our social standing, Olivia never made me feel small, at least not in the beginning. She said she admired my drive, my work ethic, my refusal to depend on anyone, and I admired her brilliance, her control, her ability to navigate any situation with grace. We built our lives together, joint investments, properties, and most significantly, partial ownership of one of the largest luxury cruise lines in the region. My career flourished with her influence, but I always worked twice as hard to ensure no one could say I succeeded because of her. But somewhere along the way, the warmth faded. Olivia became distant, less patient, easily irritated by minor things. She worked longer hours, spent more time on business trips, and her phone became something she guarded with silent paranoia. I told myself it was stress. Every marriage hit rough patches. I didn't want to believe what my instincts were whispering. Even as the emotional distance widened, I refused to confront her. I thought time would heal us. I believed the cruise. I arranged a full month at sea visiting exotic ports would be the chance we needed to reconnect. isolated from the world, free from the pressures of work, with only each other to lean on. That was my plan, my desperate hope. But Olivia had made other plans. The moment I stepped onto the ship, hours earlier than scheduled, I spotted her laughing with Michael. I had met Michael once before, briefly. A young, polished executive who worked under Olivia at her firm. Had the perfect smile, the kind that looked practiced. His ambition was obvious, though he wore it behind a thin layer of humility. I never trusted him, but I also never gave voice to my suspicions. I told myself it was professional courtesy between them, nothing more. Now, seeing him on our cruise, standing so comfortably close to my wife, all my carefully built denial crumbled. The intimacy between them wasn't imagined. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. Olivia had brought her lover aboard the ship I owned, on the vacation I had arranged for us, on the anniversary of our marriage. It wasn't just betrayal, it was public humiliation. Every crew member, every guest on board who recognized me as part owner would soon be whispering behind my back. The man who couldn't even control his own wife. I wanted to march up to them, drag Michael off the ship, demand answers from Olivia, right there. But something stopped me. It wasn't weakness. It was calculation. I had worked too hard to let emotions rule me now. For 5 years, I had given Olivia everything. Stability, partnership, respect. I had allowed her control, given her space, trusted her decisions even when they overshadowed mine. I thought compromise was the cost of keeping our relationship strong, but I was done compromising. I slipped away, from the deck without them noticing my presence. My mind was cold, clear, and focused for the first time in months. This cruise would not be ruined by her choices. It would not end with me as the victim. Olivia thought she held the power in our marriage because I had allowed her to feel that way. She had mistaken my patience for submission. Now she would learn the difference. Michael could enjoy the ocean breeze while he still had the chance. Olivia could play her games while she still felt in control. But very soon, both of them would realize that I was not the man they thought I was. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't plead for explanations or apologies. I would end this on my terms. The cruise had only just begun. I spent the rest of that day observing them carefully, never revealing my presence. They moved through the ship like a couple on honeymoon. Michael draped his arm around Olivia's waist as they walked the promenade. She leaned into him as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Every touch, every shared glance, every soft whisper confirmed what I no longer needed to question. When evening arrived, they entered the grand dining hall together. The chandeliers cast a warm glow over the polished tables, filled with laughing, passengers enjoying gourmet meals. And there they were, sitting at the table I had originally reserved for Olivia and me, sipping champagne like nothing was out of place. Michael was dressed sharply, his tailored suit accentuating his carefully cultivated image. Olivia wore a navy silk dress I had given her last year for our anniversary, the very dress I had imagined her wearing for me on this cruise. Instead, she wore it for him. She raised her glass to toast, her lips curling into a smile that once belonged to me. I stood near the entrance, partially obscured by one of the marble pillars, watching them. The crew glanced nervously in my direction, clearly aware of my presence but too afraid to approach. I saw the looks they exchanged, whispers, carried on the air like invisible knives slicing into my pride. Michael reached across the table, gently touching Olivia's hand. She didn't pull away. She simply smiled, lowering her eyes, as if savoring the attention. I could almost hear his words, though I was too far to make them out. They were soft, intimate, words not meant for me. I turned away, my stomach tightening, with a cold rage that burned deeper with every passing second. Later that night, I returned to the private quarters reserved for ownership. As I closed the door behind me, the weight of betrayal settled on my chest. This was no longer speculation. This was no longer suspicion eating at my mind. I had seen it with my own eyes. My wife wasn't having an emotional crisis or temporary confusion. She had replaced me right in front of everyone. Yet what struck me even more was her audacity. This wasn't a quiet affair hidden in the shadows. She had brought him onto my ship, onto our cruise, as if daring me to act, as if my humiliation was entertainment for them. I opened the minibar and poured myself a glass of scotch. The liquor burned my throat, but I welcomed the pain. It was cleaner than the one twisting inside my chest. My phone vibrated on the table, a message from Sophia. "Is everything okay on the cruise? You haven't replied." I stared at the message for a moment before typing a simple response. "Everything's under control." Sophia had been my business partner since the early days. She knew me well enough to sense when something was wrong, but I wasn't ready to let anyone see my weakness. Not yet. I finished my drink and sat in the dark, listening to the distant sounds of the ship. Passengers laughing, glasses clinking, waves lapping against the hull. The world moved on, unaware of the storm building inside me. The next morning, I received a schedule of the ship's planned activities. Olivia and Michael had signed up for a couple's massage at the spa. They were enjoying my generosity, my investment, my hard work. Every luxury they experienced on this cruise existed because of me, and still, they disrespected me with no hesitation, no guilt. I knew Olivia well enough to understand her reasoning. She assumed I would remain passive, that I would swallow my pride to avoid public embarrassment. She thought my silence was weakness. She was wrong. By noon, I summoned the captain to my quarters. He entered cautiously, clearly uneasy. "You requested to see me, Mr. Roberts?" "Yes," I said calmly, sliding 2 envelopes across the table. "Prepared to disembark 2 passengers at the next port. Their names are inside." He opened the envelope, scanning the names. His eyes widened slightly, but he recovered quickly. "May I ask the reason, sir?" "You don't need to concern yourself with that. Just ensure it's handled quietly and efficiently." "Understood, sir." I dismissed him with a nod, watching as he left the room. My heart pounded, not with hesitation, but with grim satisfaction. This wasn't revenge. This was necessary. Olivia and Michael had crossed a line, and now they would face consequences. That evening, as the ship approached the first port, I saw them again on the observation deck. Michael held Olivia close as the sun dipped beneath the horizon. They whispered to each other like newlyweds. She looked content, as if nothing in the world could touch them. Soon, they would understand just how wrong they were. The loudspeaker announced our arrival at port. Passengers prepared to disembark temporarily for sightseeing and shopping. Olivia and Michael gathered their things, oblivious to what awaited them. As they stepped into the main lobby, an officer from the ship's management team approached politely. "Mrs. Roberts, Mr. Michael, your disembarkation has been arranged. Please follow me." Olivia blinked, confused. "There must be a mistake. We aren't scheduled to disembark here." The officer smiled professionally. "Your arrangements have been updated." Michael glanced around nervously. "Who authorized this?" The officer simply gestured toward me, standing several feet away. Our eyes locked for the first time. Olivia's face paled. She opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. "Save it." "Olivia, you'll have plenty of time to talk, off my ship." Michael tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "You can't do this." I stepped forward, my voice calm, steady, final. "I just did." They were escorted off the ship, their protests fading behind them as the gangway lifted, as the engines rumbled, and the cruise continued. I stood at the railing, breathing in the cool sea air. The burden pressing on my chest lightened. I didn't need to hear their excuses. I didn't need their apologies. The ship sailed on. The ocean stretched endlessly ahead, but my mind was trapped. Even after Olivia and Michael were gone, their shadows lingered, the empty chair at dinner, the echo of her laughter in my ears, the weight pressing on my chest. It was everywhere. I had won, technically. I had removed them from my ship, cut the cancer from my life. Yet inside, I was bleeding in silence. I roamed the ship, sleepless. The vibrant energy of the passengers mocked me. Couples holding hands, families enjoying, dinners, friends taking photos under the glowing moonlight. I envied them in ways I never thought possible. They moved freely, unaware of how fragile everything truly was. A few words, a few choices, and your entire world could fracture into pieces you might never pick up again. Every corner of the ship carried a memory. Olivia and I had walked this deck countless times. We had danced under these stars. I remembered, the first time I showed her this vessel, proud to share my dream with her. She had clasped my hand tightly then and whispered, "You built this, and I'm so proud of you." Those words used to fill me with pride. Now they felt like empty echoes from a woman I no longer recognized. Sophia called me again, her voice filled with concern. "Robert, I saw the passenger manifest update. You offloaded her, didn't you?" I paused, gripping the phone tightly. "I did what needed to be done." "You don't sound relieved." I stared out at the moon's reflection over the black water. "Because I'm not. I thought I'd feel free, but I don't." Her voice softened. "You're grieving, Robert. Not for her. Maybe not even for the marriage, but for everything you invested. The trust. The years." The truth of her words cut deeper than I expected. She was right. Olivia hadn't only betrayed me romantically, she had shattered my belief in everything we had built together. I wasn't mourning her. I was mourning my own foolishness. That night, I couldn't sleep. The ceiling of my cabin seemed to lower itself, pressing against me. My heart pounded harder with every hour that passed. I sat up, pulled on my jacket, and left my cabin, wandering aimlessly through the sleeping ship. I ended up at the bridge where the captain stood, quietly monitoring the calm sea. He glanced back as I entered, but said nothing. We stood together, in silence for several long minutes, watching the stars. Finally, I broke the stillness. "Do you ever regret it? The responsibility? The isolation?" He kept his eyes forward. "Every captain sails with ghosts behind him, Mr. Roberts, but regret is a luxury we leave ashore." I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to. The weight of command, the isolation of leadership, it had always been part of who I was. But until now, I never realized how deeply that loneliness ran. For days after Olivia's removal, my mind looped through every moment of our marriage. I questioned every conversation, every business decision we made together. Had she ever really loved me? Or was I simply convenient? A stepping stone to elevate her career, her status. The more I thought, the darker my answers became. The most torturous part wasn't her infidelity, it was my blindness. The signs had been there, but I had convinced myself she was just stressed, that she still loved me but needed space. I had ignored my instincts out of fear of losing her, fear of being alone, fear of failure. Now I was alone anyway. Passengers still approached me occasionally, pretending not to know the scandal but offering hollow pleasantries. "Beautiful. Cruise, Mr. Roberts, you've built something remarkable." I smiled politely, nodding. They saw my success, not my ruin. Sophia arrived at the next port as planned. She boarded quietly, understanding the fragile state I was in. She didn't speak much during our initial meeting. Instead, she simply sat across from me in the private dining lounge, sipping her tea. After a long silence, she said, "You know, you didn't lose because of her betrayal." I raised an eyebrow, confused. "Then why do I feel like I've lost everything?" "You lost because you forgot who you were. You built this empire with your own hands. You pulled yourself from nothing, but somewhere along the way, you allowed her to convince you that you were less without her." Her words hung heavy between us. "I stayed," I whispered. Even when the signs were there, I stayed. I kept thinking she'd come back to me. Sophia's voice remained gentle but firm. "That's because you loved her, but love doesn't mean blindness. Now you see clearly. That's not weakness. That's strength. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to feel the strength she spoke of. But all I felt was empty. The part of me that used to dream, to build, to push forward. It felt like it had died somewhere along the journey. Later that night, I found myself once again standing at the railing, staring into the endless dark waves. The cool air stung my face, but I welcomed the sting. It reminded me that I was still here, still breathing. My reflection stared back from the glass. I didn't recognize. The man looking at me, the confident builder, the dreamer, the husband, he was gone. What remained was someone harder, colder, sharper. I whispered to the sea, "Never again." The waves answered with their steady rhythm, carrying my promise into the void. The days rolled by, and though the cruise continued smoothly, my mind remained restless. The betrayal was behind me, but its weight clung to my every thought. Each quiet moment was filled with questions that had no answers. I tried to distract myself with work, meetings with the crew, and business calls with Sophia, but every conversation seemed hollow. Then, just as I thought I had stabilized, the next blow landed, uninvited and sharp. Late one evening, Sophia requested a private meeting in my office. She looked uneasy, holding a folder tightly in her hands. Her usual calm was replaced with something far more serious. "You need to see this," she said, placing the folder on my desk. I flipped it open and scanned the contents. At first, it didn't register. Financial documents, contracts, bank transfers, all stamped and dated. But as my eyes traced each page, my stomach tightened. These weren't just random business papers. These were records of company assets quietly transferred, manipulated through shell corporations, rerouted to overseas accounts. Names I didn't recognize, accounts I never authorized. "What is this?" I asked, my voice low. Sophia exhaled slowly. "These are your company's holdings, pieces of it being siphoned off, and it's not recent. It's been happening for almost a year." I looked up sharply. "How?" Her lips pressed together. Olivia. Hearing her name again was like reopening a wound that hadn't even started to scab. My hands curled into fists as my eyes returned to the documents. "She used the legal access you gave her," Sophia continued. "As your spouse and business partner, she had full authority over certain assets. When you were focused on expansion in this cruise line, she was building her own safety net behind your back." My pulse quickened. So, all this time, the affairs, the distance, she wasn't just cheating emotionally. She was preparing to leave me completely, financially secure. Sophia nodded. "Exactly. But it gets worse." She pulled out another set of documents, a detailed merger proposal. "Olivia wasn't doing this alone," she said. "Michael is involved. They've been working with one of your competitors. Their plan was to force you into a vulnerable position, then buy out your remaining shares through a proxy." I stared at the papers, feeling the room grow colder around me. This wasn't just infidelity. This was strategic betrayal. Olivia hadn't simply fallen into another man's arms. She had orchestrated a calculated plan to dismantle everything I had built. She was trying to erase me not only as her husband, but as a businessman, as if I had never existed. I leaned back in my chair, breathing slowly, trying to keep the fury under control. "How much damage have they done?" Sophia's voice softened. "Not as much as they hoped. We caught it early. The shell companies haven't finished moving the funds yet. If we act now, we can freeze most of the accounts." I nodded, my voice quiet, but sharp. "Then freeze everything." Sophia didn't hesitate. Already in motion. As she left the room, I remained seated, staring at the wall in front of me. The betrayal had reached a level I hadn't even considered. She hadn't just destroyed our marriage. She had tried to annihilate my existence. The anger inside me solidified into something colder, heavier, a kind of focus I hadn't felt before. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. This was war. She thought removing her and Michael from the cruise had been my final move. She was wrong. That was only the beginning. The sun had barely risen when my legal team contacted me. The financial freeze had gone through successfully. Olivia and Michael's accounts were locked. The assets they had tried to hide were frozen mid-transfer. What was intended to be a clean escape for them had collapsed overnight. Sophia called me immediately after the confirmation. "It's done," she said. "They can't access a single cent." I allowed myself a small, bitter smile. Good. Now let's see how long it takes for them to crawl back. By noon, it happened. Olivia called. Her voice on the phone was tight, controlled, but underneath I could hear the desperation beginning to seep through. "Robert, we need to talk." I remained calm. "Now you want to talk?" "I think we've both made mistakes," she began, trying to sound reasonable, almost soothing. "Let's not destroy each other like this." "You mean like you tried to destroy me?" My tone was steady, but the sharp edge was undeniable. There was a brief silence on her end. "You're blowing things out of proportion. This doesn't have to turn ugly." "It's already ugly, Olivia," I replied, "and you made it that way." Her voice grew sharper. "You think you can trap me like this? The authorities won't let you freeze my assets forever." I chuckled, my anger cold now, controlled. "You really don't understand the situation And those aren't your assets, Olivia. You tried to steal what was never yours. You committed fraud. You colluded with Michael to strip me of everything I built. You didn't just cheat on me. You tried to erase me entirely." "You don't have proof," she snapped. "I have everything," I said quietly. "Bank statements, paper trails, witnesses. You underestimated how thorough Sophia could be." She fell silent again, but I could hear her shallow breathing. "Meet me," she said finally, her voice trembling slightly. "Face to face. Let's end this properly." I agreed. I wanted to see her eyes when she realized everything she thought she had was gone. We met at a private conference room at the law firm. Olivia arrived wearing the same confidence she always wore in public, but this time it was cracked. She was dressed perfectly, her hair flawless, but the bags under her eyes betrayed her sleepless nights. Michael wasn't with her. I sat across from her, my attorneys and hers seated at opposite ends of the table. She tried to smile at me, but it was hollow. "Robert, Olivia." Her attorney cleared his throat. "My client would like to propose a settlement, a division of assets that will allow both parties to walk away with dignity." I didn't respond. I simply slid a thick folder across the table. Her attorney opened it. His face drained of color as he scanned the documents. Olivia leaned forward, trying to read his expression, but the dread was already creeping across her face. "What is it?" she asked, her voice brittle. Her lawyer spoke quietly. "He has everything. Olivia, the fraudulent transfers, the forged authorizations, the offshore accounts, the collusion with Michael." Olivia's lips parted, but no words came out. I finally spoke. "You thought you were clever, that you could manipulate me, empty my accounts, run away with him, and start fresh, but you forgot who I am. You forgot what I'm capable of when pushed." Her hands trembled. "Robert, Don't," I cut her off. "Don't insult both of us with fake apologies. You made your choices. You calculated every move, and now you'll live with the consequences." Her attorney tried to regain control. "Perhaps we can renegotiate terms. Surely both sides would prefer to avoid criminal charges." I interrupted him. "That's not for you to decide. I've already filed formal complaints with the authorities. This is no longer a negotiation." Olivia's voice cracked. "Please, Robert, you're not like this." "You don't know who I am," I said calmly. "You never did." Tears welled up in her eyes. For a moment, the confident woman disappeared, replaced by the one who used to cling to my arm, who once promised forever. "I only wanted security," she whispered. "You wanted power," I corrected, "and you tried to steal mine." Her voice grew desperate. "What about everything we've built? Everything we shared?" "You mean everything I built?" Everything you tried to steal. Robert, please, she whispered again, her voice cracking fully now. Don't ruin both of us. I leaned forward, my voice a quiet blade. You ruined yourself the moment you brought him onto my ship. The room fell into heavy silence. Finally, her lawyer sighed, closing the folder slowly. We will cooperate fully with the investigation. I nodded once. See that you do. As the meeting ended, Olivia lingered as the attorneys left the room. For a brief moment, we stood alone. Her voice was soft, broken. Do you hate me? I stared at her for several long seconds. No, I said quietly. You're not worth that much emotion anymore. Her tears finally fell, but I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, small and powerless for the first time. 2 days later, Michael reached out to me privately. The man who once paraded his affair in front of me now sounded like a frightened child. Robert, he started, trying to sound composed. Listen, I didn't know she was transferring assets behind your back. I was just... Stop, I interrupted him coldly. You were her accomplice. You thought you were clever too, but you were nothing more than her pawn. She would have discarded you eventually, just like she tried to discard me. Can we work something out? He pleaded. I have nothing left. The authorities are coming after me. If you could just... I hung up before he could finish. Sophia met me that evening. We sat quietly on the deck of the ship, watching the sun vanish into the horizon. It's done, she said gently. I nodded. It's done. You didn't just survive. Robert, you won. I didn't respond immediately. The victory felt hollow. The marriage was ashes. The betrayal had carved something permanent into me, but I was still standing. Sophia's hand found mine, offering silent strength. You don't have to carry it forever, she whispered. I squeezed her hand gently. No, but I'll never forget it either. As the stars emerged one by one above us, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The storm was over. The legal process unfolded swiftly after the confrontation. The authorities moved in on both Olivia and Michael. The evidence we gathered left them no room to negotiate, no cracks to escape through. Olivia's assets were seized, her reputation shattered. Michael lost everything, his career, his standing, even his freedom for a time. Their plan, which had once seemed so carefully orchestrated, crumbled like sand under the weight of reality. I watched it all unfold from a distance. I didn't celebrate, nor did I gloat. I had no interest in vengeance for the sake of emotion. What I wanted, I had already achieved: control, justice, and absolute separation from their betrayal. Once the financial matters were finalized, my divorce with Olivia became little more than a formality. The court processed the paperwork quickly, as her attorneys had no leverage left. There was nothing for her to bargain with. What little remained of her fortune was divided according to the law, but I didn't even need most of it. The symbolic victory was enough. Sophia handled much of the business side, ensuring our company remained steady through the storm. If anything, our success grew stronger after the scandal. Investors respected how I handled the crisis: calm, surgical, ruthless when necessary. The story of my personal betrayal spread within the corporate circles, but not as a tale of scandal, rather as a story of how I had protected my empire without allowing my emotions to destroy my judgment. A few months later, Olivia reached out one last time. Her voice trembled over the phone. Robert, please, can we meet? One last time. There was no desperation left in her tone, only emptiness, a hollow shell of the woman she once was. Against my better judgment, I agreed, not because I wanted to see her, but because I wanted to put the last nail in this coffin with my own hands. We met at a small cafe far from the city center. She looked older, worn, her once flawless appearance cracked under the weight of everything she had lost. There was no pretense left, no jewelry, no designer clothes, no carefully curated smiles. Just Olivia, exposed, defeated. She sat across from me, her hands trembling as she held her coffee cup. I never imagined it would end like this. I didn't respond. I didn't want to destroy you, she whispered. But you tried, I answered, softly. You didn't care what happened to me. You cared about what you thought you deserved. Tears welled in her eyes, but she fought them back. I was scared. I thought if I secured my own future, I wouldn't have to depend on anyone ever again. You already had security, I said, my voice steady. You had me, but you wanted more. You wanted power, and you lost everything because of it. She lowered her gaze, her voice barely audible. Do you hate me? I stared at her for a moment before answering, No, you're not worth that. Her tears fell silently this time. She didn't bother wiping them away. I miss what we had, she whispered. What we had never existed, I said. You loved what I provided, not who I was. Her lips quivered. You were always so strong. I thought you didn't need me. I needed loyalty, I said. I needed honesty. You gave me neither. The silence between us grew heavier, suffocating. Finally, she looked up one last time. Is there any part of you that would ever forgive me? I shook my head. There's nothing left to forgive. We're done. Completely. Her shoulders sagged as the last shred of hope left her. She whispered, I understand, and stood up to leave. She paused for a moment, as if hoping I'd call her back. But I didn't. I watched her walk out of my life for good, her figure shrinking into the distance like a fading memory. That was the last time I saw her. With Olivia and Michael gone, I finally breathed freely again. My mind no longer haunted by the weight of betrayal, my future no longer tethered to people who only sought to drain me. I reclaimed full control of my company and slowly expanded it into new markets. Sophia remained by my side, steady and loyal, her guidance invaluable. Over time, something unexpected grew between Sophia and me. What started as mutual respect and friendship deepened into something far more personal. She had been there through my darkest hours, never asking for anything, never overstepping, simply standing quietly in my corner. When I finally allowed myself to feel again, it was Sophia who helped me rebuild. One evening, as we stood together on the upper deck of one of my newest cruise ships, she turned to me. You've come a long way, Robert, she said softly. I smiled faintly. Because you stood with me. She looked into my eyes, her expression warm but steady. You didn't need me. You just needed to be reminded who you were. I reached for her hand and held it gently. Maybe I didn't need anyone to save me, but I'm glad you stayed. For the first time in years, I felt something genuine. Peace. Not forced, not temporary. Real peace. We watched the horizon as the sun set, casting a golden trail over the calm sea. The past was behind me. The pain had shaped me, but it no longer controlled me. A few months later, Sophia and I officially became partners, in business and in life. There was no grand announcement, no need for public declarations. We simply lived, quietly and fully, building something stronger together. Occasionally, I would hear whispers about Olivia. She had relocated, struggling to rebuild her life from the ashes of her failed schemes. Michael had disappeared into obscurity, his reputation permanently stained. Neither of them held space in my mind anymore. They were ghosts from a chapter long closed. I had learned one truth above all. Some betrayals are blessings in disguise. They burn away the falsehoods, leaving only what's real, what's worth keeping. As my ship cut through the open waters, the stars glittered above, reflecting in the endless waves. I had lost everything once, but now I had built something far greater, something untouchable, and this time, no one would take it from me.